Hello everybody, thank you for joining me today. So we are going to be talking about this thing today. Now I know what someone's, or probably everyone's probably thinking, what is this? Why? It looks like every garbage 80s kids keyboard that they ever made. I mean, it's got harsh edges and buttons galore and strange colors and these keys that are just tiny, tiny garbage, but bear with me. This is the Yamaha PSS-460. This is, as you've guessed, a children's keyboard, or at least it was marketed towards children. It doesn't look very special on the outside. It absolutely does not look very special. And when I tell people about this keyboard and I show people this keyboard, their question is generally, why do you have it? I have it because it's fun and it's interesting, and I actually purposely went and got one of these off eBay. So right off the bat, it looks pretty simple. You've got stereo speakers, or at least two speakers. You've got your preset banks. You've got your rhythm banks, some mixing over here for the accompaniment. Again, tiny little garbage keys. This section here, you probably won't be able to see it very well on the camera what it says, but this is what makes this instrument interesting. This is from 1986 to 1987. I've got a reference sheet over here, just trying to read my facts and get them right. What makes this thing special is it does not use standard subtractive synthesis or additive synthesis, whatever, and it does not use PCM samples. This instrument uses FM synthesis. Yes, this is an FM synthesis keyboard. This uses Yamaha's YM3812, which is a 2-operator FM synthesis chip, and that's actually the same chip they used on early Sound Blaster cards. So, although this is definitely not going to sit in the ranks of the Yamaha DX7, this is going to give you that classic FM sound. So, when you start it up, you get a sound. This is the first preset you get, which sounds something like this. Nothing too groundbreaking. Wobble there, excuse that. Doesn't sound anything special. You can go in here, got a violin really. We got a piano, yeah, piano. The audio on this thing is kind of hard. It actually, on the subject of audio, it does not have just a standard audio jack output. It actually has RCA jack outputs, and it has stereo RCA jack outputs. And I mentioned earlier these are stereo speakers because this thing is a stereo synthesizer, which you're, again, probably thinking right now, what do you mean? How is it a stereo synthesizer? Simple, it's a stereo synthesizer because it has stereo chorus, or on this calls it stereo symphonic. So if we take this sound here, kind of flat, kind of harsh, and we engage the stereo chorus, which adds quite a bit of background noise, yeah, it gets much bigger. So you can take a sound that is thin and not really interesting, like, I don't know, electric piano. And it's also got a sustain option to make the notes last just a little bit longer. And add a little bit of symphonic chorus. And you'll have to excuse my already bad playing. It is made much worse by these absolutely tiny keys. So that alone makes it interesting to me. I mean, we've got a 2-operator FM synthesizer using Yamaha's iconic technology with stereo chorus, which takes a simple synthesizer and brings so much more depth to it. But it gets even better because this section right here, if you click this button, you have engaged what's called the digital synthesizer, which it wants to give you the illusion that you are programming the synthesizer, but in reality, this is just letting you change very, very basic parameters of the FM synthesizer. So, for example, you have wave, spectrum, modulation, attack, decay, and volume. These words mean nothing. Well, I take that back. Attack. Attack does do what you would expect it to. I suspect my decay slider is broken because it does not change the sound at all. And it actually bothers me because I know that will make a change in the dynamics, so I've got to look into why that does not work. But everything else on this instrument actually works fine. So this is the sound. The center tap on all these sliders is 3. I don't know why that is, but this is the most like standard sound. And this is obviously without the symphonic chorus. So wave and spectrum to me are very similar if you've ever programmed, because I have Yamaha TX81Z, and I know a little bit about programming that, and wave and spectrum are like really controlling your operators, like the main like pitches, and I guess maybe a little bit of the waveform. It's hard to explain, you'll hear it now. And then spectrum and on that note, if you take the spectrum all the way down, you get some impressive low end out of this thing. And then modulation is almost like a filter, actually. You kind of can... Ooh, getting a little peak there. So it kind of lets you change the brightness of the sound. And then obviously attack... yeah, so that kind of gives you your attack, obviously. So that you can program sounds with that. That'll give you some interesting sounds, especially when you combine it with your sustained vibrato or chorus options. But it gets better. There's more. If I turn off the digital synthesizer, you go back to your preset. So flute. There's a flute. But if again, I'm on a preset here and I'm not going to engage the digital synthesizer. You can edit the presets. So not only do you have the digital synthesizer, which really doesn't give you a lot of flexibility, but you can edit any of these presets. And some of these presets are actually decent FM sounds. The vibes are not terrible. And you can edit this. So your sonic capabilities are just completely opened up at this point. So that is interesting to me. You can make pads with this thing, you can make leads with this thing, you can make quick little keys and whatnot with this thing. I mean, and then not to mention you've got your classic little brass sounds. And then again, I went over the flute sound. You've got clarinet, which isn't terrible. So, yeah, I could go over that all day. I could go into that all day. But it takes it a step further. Of course it does. So obviously, there's your FM synthesis. Very interesting. I've spent hours playing with this thing, and it still entertains. Drum machine. What does this thing employ for a drum machine? Well, no PSM samples on this thing at all. So it's not sample drums. All the later ones, the later PSS 400 series or the 500 series does have sample drums while retaining the FM synthesis. There's actually a lot of these Porta sounds that use the OPL chip, but a lot of them don't have the programmer, so they do not interest me. But this drum machine is a true synthesized drum machine, but it doesn't use standard synthesis. This is again using the FM synthesis engine to create the beats. So yeah, it has these strange kind of FM analog drums, which are interesting. Not my sound, I will admit. I've never really found a way to squeeze these into a track, but they are interesting. And of course it does have auto accompaniment, so if I choose a sound here, a little bit of added reverb. So that's interesting. It's got a unique sound, but it's kind of dated and very simple. But again, this thing brings more to the table. This little section here is labeled Custom Drummer, and what does that do? Well, on this section of the keyboard you have labels, or they're not labels, they're actually physical, plastically molded, whatever. You've got a kick, a open cymbal, closed cymbal, what I can assume is a snare, and then I think a tom drum. I don't know what these really are supposed to correlate to, but if I hit program start end, it's going to take a default track. If I hold down the cancel button and then hold down all of these keys, I now have a blank track, and I can record. And there you go. You can program a drum track on this thing. It's super simple. You do not get a whole lot of sounds, but it's a programmed drum track, which is, to me at least, interesting. Let me see here if we can get up a little bit of... We got gated reverb. I'm using a Behringer FX 2000 here. So let's see. So the drum machine's not bad, honestly. You can get interesting sounds. So, yeah, that's basically it for the features. So it's extremely interesting. Because the capabilities that this really opens up for you is pretty good at this point. I've got an angry sound coming from my computer. I'm not sure why that is. Hopefully Logic isn't giving me trouble. But, basic specs, obviously, 2 operators, like I said. It's got 9 voices, which, considering this keyboard, I mean, that's plenty. 49 mini keys, garbage. My biggest qualm with this instrument is the keyboard. It's worthless. You really can't play anything on it. And there's no MIDI, obviously. This thing is before MIDI was really a big deal. So, that's worthless. I can't do anything with it, really. But I have managed to make some interesting sounds with it, some interesting pads, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recoup here, get my DAW under wraps, whatever it seems to be doing at the moment, and do some sound demos of just what this thing's really capable of. So yeah, that's where we're going to come back in just a moment. Alright, that's quite enough of that before Jar himself puts a restraining order on me. But anyway, so yeah, hopefully you heard some of what I was going for there in the fact that this thing is interesting, and I feel like if you put it in a mix, you would not be able to say that, hey, that is a toy from 1987. Well, as soon as you start playing with this, you would know, but here, I think that is... You could have used this. I'm surprised, honestly, that some artists back in the 80s didn't end up using this in their mixes. And if someone did, please let me know. I would love to hear an actual era-correct song using this. Like, I don't care if it wasn't Chart and if it wasn't Tangerine Dream. You know, just anyone using this in a studio setting would be interesting to me. I honestly don't know how much this thing retailed for. I don't know how much the DX7 or the DX... I don't know, 15, or because I know there's lower end Yamaha synths. I don't know how they retailed, but my TX81Z, for example, which I know is like a stripped down DX7, that is a fairly decent FM synthesizer. I think it's a 4-operator synthesizer. Yes, 4-operator. I think it's like a 9-voice or something. I can't remember, to be quite honest. Sorry. But anyway, that is a decent synthesizer, and I'm sure it wasn't cheap, but I'm sure people would have much rather paid for something like the TX81Z than for this garbage toy, because the TX81Z with 4 operators is much more useful, and plus it MIDI. You can connect anything you want to it. This thing reduces you to this terrible keyboard. And I don't know how to describe the keys because I don't really have anything to like, here's a Monotron. The second worst set of keys I own. Like, I mean, maybe that'll give you an idea of the size of the keys. Or a, looking around things, here's a 1/4-inch tape reel, you know, so I mean, these keys are not very big, so unfortunate, but hopefully you enjoyed this. I thought this was a very interesting look at this instrument that I talk about a lot to different people.